They didn't push her because she was weak. They pushed her because she was becoming. And nothing terrifies a person more than watching someone else remember who the hell they are. She hit the bottom. Plus, she lay there. She bled in the dark in ways that don't show on skin. The kind of bleeding that happens somewhere behind the sternum, behind every polite smile she'd ever performed for people who needed her small. They walked away certain. That was their first mistake. Their second, actually. I was forgetting that some people aren't built to stay at the bottom. Not because they're extraordinary, in my opinion, not because fate intervened, but because something in them, something old and untranslatable, simply refused. She didn't climb back up the cliff because she was brave. She climbed back because she was furious. And there's a thing, not altitude, not gravity, not the collective smugness of people who've never had to survive anything, that can stop a woman who has finally, at the bottom of everything, stopped asking permission to exist. This isn't a comeback story, it is a reckoning. Hold on, which this gets worse before it gets better. And better isn't even the right word. Better implies she went back to what she was. She didn't. She went pretty much forward into something they didn't have a name for. Something that wore her face. Plus, something that remembered every single one of them. I've filed 47 incident reports in my career. I know what a person looks like when they've decided to break someone. I know the particular economy of cruelty, how it requires almost no energy, how the people who practice it best do it with half a smile and their hands in their pockets. I was filling out Form 7C when it happened. There's like a detail that bothers me still, the form. I was completing a routine field observation, Section B, Paragraph 4, Behavioral Anomalies in Group Dynamics, when I heard the sound, not a scream. And screams are melodramatic. This, I guess, was quieter. This was the sound a person makes when the ground is no longer where they expected it to be. A thud, which then, nothing. I looked up. Her name was Mara Solis, 31. Former community coordinator, current nothing, according to the paperwork I'd been handed that morning. The paperwork was thorough about what she used to be. It was uninterested in what she was becoming. She was at the bottom of a dry creek ravine, what the locals called the Cut. That ran behind the community center where the neighborhood board meeting had just ended. The board, 12 people with matching lanyards and the territorial energy of golden retrievers guarding a single bowl. I'd been assigned to observe the meeting, plus a routine audit. Displacement funding disputes, for what it's worth. Which nothing extraordinary, the briefing said. The briefing was wrong. What I'd watched for 2 hours inside that fluorescent-lit room was a thing I don't have a clean clinical term for. I've since decided the closest word is managed demolition. The board had spent 2 hours systematically disassembling Mara Solis, not loudly, not obviously, but with the precise architectural patience of people who'd done this before to people who didn't realize it was happening until too late. She'd proposed a youth shelter, brought documentation. I brought photographs, actual photographs printed, organized by date with handwritten captions because she'd run out of printer ink. Finished the labels by hand at what I later estimated was probably 2 in the morning. I noticed her, hands when she spread the photos on the table. The pen marks were still there. Blue ink, ring finger, right hand. The board listened with the particular facial expression of people who have already decided. Then they spoke. Plus, I'm not in opposition. In management, there's a difference. Opposition at least acknowledges that you're a threat worth arguing with. Management speaks to you like you're a fire that simply needs redirecting. A bit of airflow here, close off the oxygen there, and you'll burn yourself out without them having to lift a finger. The funding cycle is closed for this quarter, Mara. We appreciate your passion, but the liability questions around unhoused youth are, perhaps next year, when you've had time to develop the proposal more fully. She'd had 3 years. I knew because I'd read the file. Plus 3 years of proposals, revisions, community surveys, revised surveys, resubmissions. The ink on her fingers wasn't from last night. After, in the parking lot, 2 board members had a conversation 6 feet from her car. They didn't lower their voices, and I was beside my own vehicle. I was technically out of jurisdiction. I kept my pen on the form. She'll figure it out. She always does, and then she comes back and we do this again. Not this time. I pulled her funding application. Both of them, the city pipeline and the county match. A pause. She won't know until it's too late to reapply. Yeah. And then one of them laughed. Honestly, not meanly, almost warmly. The way you laugh about something you've already stopped thinking about. She'd found out. I don't know how. In my opinion, phone call, maybe. Something basically that reached her in the parking lot before she could reach her car. She walked to the cut. I think simply because it was away from the building, away from the lanyards, away from the handwritten captions. I followed at a distance that I told myself was professional. The path to the cut is gravel and weeds and broken fence posts, and in the dark it's the kind of terrain where a person is already fighting just to move forward. She was moving fast, the way you move when the alternative is standing still and feeling all of it. I lost her, I guess, at the tree line. I heard the sound 14 seconds later. She was in the ravine, 7 feet down, maybe 8. The creek was dry. It's been dry for 3 summers running, another thing in the file. So she'd landed on pale, cracked earth and scrub. She was moving. That was the first thing. She was moving. Her hands pressed flat against the ground, not reaching for help, and not signaling distress, just pressing, like she was checking that the ground was real, like she needed pretty much to confirm the physical fact of surfaces. I called it in, reported my location, kept my eyes on her, which she sat up. Her left, honestly, arm was wrong, held too carefully, at an angle that meant something had gone badly in the shoulder. She didn't look at the arm. She looked at the wall of the ravine, packed earth, root systems, a couple of stones. I've thought about sort of what I saw on her face in that moment. I've tried to put it in precise language. In my report, I wrote, "Subject appeared disoriented." That was a lie, technically. She didn't look disoriented at all. She looked calibrating, like something in her was running a very quiet, very fast calculation. What does the wall have? What is the distance between those 2 facts? She, I guess, reached up with her right hand and grabbed a root. Pretty much don't. Oh, I thought. You have a damaged shoulder, and it's dark, and I've already called for assistance. She pulled. She made it 4 feet before her grip slipped and she dropped back. Not all the way down. 3 feet for what it's worth, maybe, which she caught herself on a stone shelf I'dn't seen. She pressed her, basically, forehead to the earth wall. Just for a moment, and I thought, now she'll wait. She didn't. She shifted her grip. Found a different route. I guess a higher one. I'm still not certain what I was watching. My training gives me frameworks for crisis response, for acute stress behavior, for escalating intervention protocols. None of my frameworks had a category for this. For a woman, 8 feet down in the dark, alone, with one working arm. Handwritten ink on the fingers of the other hand, who looked at a wall and decided the wall was a problem she could solve. Sort of. She pulled again. This time she didn't slip. This time, she moved up. Yeah, and I put my pen down on the form. Section B, paragraph 4. Behavioral anomalies in group dynamics. I wrote 3 words and stopped, and I don't understand. And then I stood at the edge of the cut in the dark, and I watched her climb. She got out of the ravine on her own. I kind of want to be precise about this because my report, filed 40 minutes later, uses the word extracted in a way that implies I pulled her out, which isn't what happened. What happened is that she climbed out and I happened to be standing at the top when she reached it, and she looked at me with the expression of someone who is managing her opinion of your presence with considerable personal effort. Her shoulder was dislocated. I could see it in the way she held the arm, not cradled, not babied, but managed, accounted for. Like she'd adjusted, basically, her operating parameters around it and filed it under problems for later. "I saw you follow me," she said. I'd my badge out. Reflex, and I guess Regional Audit Office. I was observing I know what you were doing. She walked past me toward the gravel path. I followed, which was, in retrospect, probably the only reasonable option. There's a diner, 3 blocks from the cut, called Peg's. It is open look until 2 in the morning and serves coffee that tastes like it was brewed in 1987 and never changed. Mara went there directly, sat in the far booth, and then asked for the coffee without looking at the menu. I sat across from her because she hadn't told me not to. This is a quirk I've noted in myself since. I wait for explicit prohibition rather than implied one. My, supervisor calls it poor social inference. I've started to think it's something else, and Mara ordered pie. Apple. Plus, with ice cream, which the waitress, a woman named Donna, according to her tag, who had the look of someone who'd seen Mara sit in that booth before and had opinions about the condition she was in tonight, brought without comment and with an extra scoop. Mara ate the pie left-handed. She didn't mention the shoulder. I didn't mention it either. My personal log, which I keep in a green spiral notebook that my supervisor has asked me 3 times to digitize, reads as follows for that night. Subject doesn't appear to be in shock. Subject appears to be in something worse than shock. Pretty much shock is acute. This is something chronic, something she's been practicing. I underlined practicing. I didn't know why at the time. Well, she talked. Eventually. Not about the meeting. Not actually about the board or the forms or the funding pulled from underneath 3 years of handwritten captions. She talked about basically the shelter she was trying to build. Not what it would. Do, not I guess. The programmatic outcomes and deliverables she'd put in the proposal, but the physical space. There's this, I think, room, she said. On the 2nd floor of the building I want to use. It has a window that faces east, which in the morning it gets this. She paused. Made a gesture with her right hand that approximated something specific. Like the light is actually trying and like it wants to be there. I wrote that down. Like the light wants to be there. The kids I'm trying to get off the street, she continued. Most of them have never had a room where the light wanted to be there. Where they woke up and something outside was pointing at them like, "You. I see you. You're here." She took a long drink of bad coffee. That's all the pretty much shelter is. It's a window, with light that wants to be there. I asked her then, and I acknowledge this was outside my professional scope. It was in fact the kind of personal inquiry that my supervisor has basically discussed with me in the context of maintaining observer neutrality. I asked her, "What are you going to do?" She looked at me, then at the pie, then back. Tonight or in general? Both. Tonight, I'm going to finish this pie. Beat. In general, I'm going to figure out who pulled the application and file a procedural complaint, because the funding cycle wasn't actually closed. I checked the city charter. There's a humanitarian exemption clause that nobody uses because nobody reads past page 40. Then I'm going to resubmit with that clause front-loaded and watch them explain to a reporter from the city desk why they blocked a youth shelter on a technicality. She said all of this at the pace and temperature of someone reading a grocery list. You already know, actually, about the applications, I said. I figured it out in the parking lot. Before... She stopped. That's before. Before the ravine. Before the cut. Before the sound I heard from 6 feet from my car while completing Section B, Paragraph 4. Then why? Because, she said, sometimes you've to go to the bottom of the thing before you can be sure it didn't kill you. I've thought about that sentence probably more than any other sentence in my 47 reports. It violates several principles of rational risk assessment. It describes something that cannot be safely quantified or modeled or predicted. I keep writing it in my green notebook. Sometimes you've to basically go to the bottom of the thing before you can be sure it didn't kill you. We sat in pegs until 11:40. Donna refilled the coffee twice. The second time she did it, she set a hand briefly on Mara's right shoulder, the working one, and didn't say anything and walked away. And Mara looked at the table for exactly 4 seconds before she picked up her fork again. 4 seconds. I counted. I don't know why. At 11:40, she got up, set cash, kind of, on the table, looked at her left arm as if checking on it, a brief clinical glance, an equipment status check. Your shoulder, I finally said. Urgent care opens at 7. That's 7 hours from now. I'm aware. She picked up her bag. Right hand, which careful. You going to put this in your report? She asked. My report is supposed to document behavioral anomalies in group dynamics. She almost smiled. Not a warm smile, more the kind a person makes when they recognize a category they've been sorted into. Document what you want, she said. I'll be at City Hall at 8. She walked out. The door had a bell above it, and the bell rang when she pushed through. And then the sound of it was so cheerful and so utterly inappropriate for the moment that I sat there for another 40 seconds before I could move. Donna came and took the plate. She come in, like that before? I asked. Donna looked at me with the expression of someone who has answered this question in her head many times and decided not to spend it. Honey, she said honestly, she always comes in like that. She walked back to the counter. I opened my green notebook. I turned to a fresh page. And I wrote, She'sn't unusual, which she's the usual, finally understood. I stared at it for a long time. Then I crossed out finally understood and wrote finally visible. That felt to be fair, closer, and not right. Closer. She was at City Hall at 7:53. I know because I was already there. I'd driven past, honestly, my apartment, past the turnoff for the 24-hour clinic I'd looked up the address for, and continued to the municipal building where I parked in the visitor lot and sat with my engine running for 11 minutes, telling myself I was just completing the audit. My supervisor would describe this as a failure of observer neutrality. My supervisor is right. She was wearing TBH, the same clothes as the night before. Different, I think. Bag. Larger. The kind with multiple external pockets that snap closed. The kind purchased specifically to carry documentation. Her left arm was in a sling fashioned from what appeared to be a scarf, dark blue, knotted high and tight with the efficiency of someone who had watched a tutorial at some point before 7 in the morning. The sling was slightly crooked at the left shoulder. She walked like the sling was a scheduling inconvenience. I'd, during the night, I pulled every file I was technically authorized to access regarding the Solace shelter proposal and the 2 funding, applications that had been removed from the city and county pipelines. My authorization technically covered the audit scope. The applications were adjacent to the audit scope. I chose not to examine the boundary too closely. What I found, the humanitarian exemption clause existed on page 43 of the city's community development charter. It had been invoked 4 times in 40 years. The most recent invocation was 2009, flood relief, and had been approved in 11 days. The applications pulled from the pipeline had been received, logged, and then manually removed, not declined, not processed, not reviewed. Removed, which I think, by a single authorized signatory. That signatory was on the board. The one who'd laughed in the parking lot. She actually found out I was in the building at 8:16. And when she came out of the clerk's office with a case number and saw me at the end of the hall. She stopped. Her pretty much face did the thing again. The calibrating thing. The running the math thing. "You're not here for the audit," she said. "The audit's an extended observation window." "Uh-huh." I handed her the folder. I'd printed the pages at a Walgreens at 6:45 because the municipal building didn't open until 8, and I didn't want it to wait. And the folder was slightly greasy from the coffee I'd also bought. She opened it, which read the first page. Turned to the second. The third page was the removal record with the signatory. She went very still. Not the stillness of shock. She'd done the shock last night, bottom of a ravine, forehead against dirt. This, honestly, was something different. This was the stillness of a person who has been carrying a weight so long they've forgotten it wasn't always there. And then someone has just pointed to it and said, "This was done to you deliberately. You weren't imagining it." The blue scarf sling, the ink on her fingers, plus 3 years of proposals. She closed the folder. "This is enough for the complaint," she said. "With the kind of charter clause, yes. Probably enough for a referral to the Oversight Commission. Probably. In my opinion, I know you're not a lawyer." She looked at the folder. How'd you get the removal record?" "Extended observation window." She looked at me. I looked at, in my opinion, the middle distance between us. "Thank you," she said. Flat. Careful. The way you say it when gratitude is complicated. When you needed the help, and the needing of it cost you something. I nodded. There wasn't thing to say that wouldn't cost her something, too. The TBH. The next 3 weeks are documented in my formal report as follows. Audit scope was expanded per supervising directive to include municipal funding administration practices. Observer maintained documentation of relevant proceedings. My green notebook has a different record. Day 2. She filed the procedural complaint, which the board chair called it a misunderstanding regarding timeline management. Day 5. The city desk reporter, she'd apparently called him before City Hall opened, and at some point between Pegs and Walgreens and the blue scarf sling, ran a piece. Page 1, Metro section. The, headline used the word suppressed. Day 9. The board chair issued a statement about his deep commitment to community partnerships. He used the phrase moving forward 4 times. Day 11. I think the humanitarian exemption clause was invoked. First time in 15 years, which day 14. The application was reinstated in both pipelines. Day 18. Provisional approval. Contingent on a revised community impact assessment, which Mara submitted on day 20 at 8:03 in the morning, 43 pages, the last 6 of which were photographs, printed, with handwritten captions. I know because she brought me a copy, not to my office. To Peg's, now where I'd started going in the evenings because the coffee tasted like 1987 and Donna refilled it without being asked, and I was working out something in my green notebook that I'dn't finished yet. She set the copy on the table, sat down, ordered pie, which Donna brought 2 forks without being asked. You didn't have to print me a copy, I said. There's a photo in there I wanted you to see. I turned to the photographs. Page 39. Second floor of the building she wanted to use. On a window. East facing. The photograph was taken at early morning. The light was doing exactly what she'd described. Was leaning into the room at an angle that looked deliberate. Looked like intent. Like it wants to be there. I stared at it for a while. The kids, I said. Have you told any of them about the shelter? A few. What did they say? She turned the fork over in her right hand. Once. Twice. One of them asked if the window was real. What did you tell her? I told her to come see it herself. The shelter opened 7 months later. I'm not in the file anymore. The audit closed. The Oversight Commission referral was handled separately. The board restructured in ways that are documented in the public record if anyone cares to look at page 43 of the city charter. I drove past the building once. It was a Thursday morning. Early. Second floor. East window. And the light was doing the thing. I don't know if anyone was standing in it. I didn't stop. I'd a form to complete, Section B, Paragraph 4, and I wasn't sure I could finish it. The last thing I wrote in my green notebook, about Mara Solis. The board threw her because they believed the bottom was the end. They forgot, or never knew, that some people are from the bottom. That the bottom, to her, was just the beginning of the climb. I turned the page, sat with the blank one for a while. Didn't write anything else. Some things don't need a footnote.